Good afternoon and welcome. I apologize for starting just a few minutes late, but we wanted to give folks a few extra minutes to get all the way over here to River Campus and Kern Place, and especially with the weather. So thank you so much for making the trip here. We have some that have come from quite far, and we are just really grateful for your time today. We'd like to welcome you to this opening panel to celebrate human rights education here at the University of Dayton. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Natalie Hudson, and I have the distinct privilege, and it really is a privilege, of directing our Human Rights Studies program. I have been leading this unique and really groundbreaking undergraduate degree program for 6 years now, and as I was just remarking, I'm quite spoiled. I get to work with some of the best and the brightest here at UD, certainly some of the most passionate. Some of them all of whom are sitting up here, and many of whom are in the audience. So welcome to all of you. The purpose of today's events really are to commemorate human rights education as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in the absence of not holding this event on the first day of finals, because December 10th is International Human Rights Day, December 6th was about as close as we could get, of course, with Christmas on campus in mind. But December 10th, 1948, of course, marks the adoption, the universal adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And here we are 70 years later with a degree program in human rights studies. Many accomplishments globally and at the local levels, and certainly a lot of work to do, as we heard from President Spina at our lunch this afternoon. In addition to 70 years of the UDHR, it's 20 years of human rights education here at UD. And actually that is a 20-year span that I personally benefited from. I did graduate from the University of Dayton, for those of you that don't know, with a minor in human rights studies. And so it is really remarkable to be in this space. But 20 years ago, a group of faculty came together and really decided to create a space for learning, for educating, for studying human rights here at UD. Many faculty were a part of that creation, some who are here, others who are not. Dr. Theo Micah, I think will be here if he's not here yet, and his late wife Linda were key, instrumental in that development of that program. One of my own mentors, Dr. Margaret Carnes, was also foundational. Dr. Mary Beth Carlson was also part of those really early and important conversations. Dr. Rick Geer has also been key in the making of this program. And of course, Dr. Mark Inslacco, who could not be here today, who was actually the founder of the major. So in addition to 20 years of the education of human rights education, 2008, we graduated our first 2 majors in human rights studies. So we decided to stop with 2 anniversaries, but because 3 seemed a bit onerous. But it is also 10 years of the major, and as many of you know, we are one of the first, if not the first, we could have that argument, undergraduate programs in human rights studies. So it's really an exciting event, and thank you for sharing this afternoon with us. So I have 5 really established and accomplished young alum, and I am so thrilled that they could join us today. I'll do some really brief introductions, but then I'll actually let them introduce themselves. So I'll just sort of start down here with Anna Maria Carls. She's our youngest alum with a Human Rights Studies and International Studies degree, 2016 UD alum. She recently graduated from Tufts with a Master's in Law and Diplomacy, and currently with the U.S. State Department. She'll tell you more about that. Then we have Laura Getz, who is a 2011 alum, and she has no less than 3 majors from the University of Dayton: political science, Spanish, and international studies with a concentration in human rights. She has a master's in social work from Washington University, St. Louis, and she's now in Denver doing some really incredible work in education, employment, and poverty, focused on anti-poverty. So welcome. Mike Scholes, who is our Dayton alum. We have many in Dayton, but Mike is carrying the flag for all of those UD alums, some who are in the audience. Mike is a 2007 grad, minor in human rights, And he currently serves as the executive director for the Mission of Mary Cooperative, many of whom you're familiar with, and for which many of our students are currently engaged in the many different areas that they work in around food security, energy security, and economic empowerment. So welcome, Mike. Kata Lucas, she is here. She is a graduate of 2012, Political Science and Human Rights Studies. She has a master's in International Affairs from the New School. She just returned from a research trip in Bosnia. Well, research and a little fun too, I hope. And she is currently doing work for the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace, and Security based in New York. And then last but certainly not least, to my right, McClain Johnson. She is a alum, political science and human rights in 2012. She has her JD from Indiana University, and she currently works in DC as attorney advisor to the National Labor Relations Board, Chairman Ring. There you go. And so it is really a pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you for being here. So what I'd like to do is to have you start, and would you mind starting at the end, just telling us a little bit about yourself and the work you do now, sort of how you came to your current position. Thank you.
Again, hello again, everyone. I'm Anna Maria Carls. I'm originally from Wisconsin. As Dr. Hudson said, I am a graduate of UD from 2016. After UD, I continued my education at the Fletcher School at Tufts University and had several internships with the Department of State, of which where I'm at right now. I came into this career path through a fellowship program that I received while I was still here at University of Dayton, in which I'll in and will continue to be in the Foreign Service for the next several years. I will be beginning my first post in April and will be living in Sao Paulo, Brazil for 2 years as a consular officer. So I'll be adjudicating visas and helping out American citizens who are overseas.
Well, first, I want to thank Dr. Hudson and the Human Rights Studies program for inviting me back home to Dayton. It's good to be back. My name is Laura Getz, and I am a community supports specialist at the Center for Work, Education, and Employment, anti-poverty organization in Denver, Colorado. And it is actually a project in Dr. Hudson's class, a service learning project here at UD, that was the spark for the road to where I'm at now. So during that project, we were working with refugees at a local elementary school, helping them tell their stories and put words. And that's when I really fell in love with people's stories and the power of stories. So that then sparked me to take an international social work class my last semester at Dayton, which then kind of shifted my career path. And so I went to WashU and got my master's in social work and with a concentration in social work with refugees and immigrants. I have always flirted with direct practice and community organizing and policy and advocacy change, and what I want to have my feet in. And so that led me to do Peace Corps service in Costa Rica. I was working in a rural coffee farming community and did a lot of work around women's rights there. After Peace Corps, I moved to Denver. I really wanted to stay connected to working with the Latino and Chicano populations there. And that's where I grew kind of a stubborn commitment to doing anti-poverty work. And my human rights curriculum has really played a role into leading me up into that, and it's definitely utilized every day.
Hi, I'm Mike Schultz, currently Executive Director of Mission Mary Cooperative. Since graduating from UD, at my time at UD, human rights helped me to think, what are the issues in the world? I traveled extensively. Center for Social Concern was a big piece where you can do immersion programs and kind of really get hands-on experience with that. As a sophomore, I helped start a nonprofit called Students for Humanity, published a book called Interconnections, and the idea was, let's take students' experiences, they explore, they discover, but they want to act. We fundraised some money to start the Zambia immersion. But since UD, as a lay Marinist, Brother Ray Fitz says me and a bunch of lay Marinist students from UD started the first lay Marinist founded, operated lay Marinist organization in the US. And Mission Mary's Cooperative's mission is food access, energy access, with a real commitment to environmental justice. So whether it's the UN Sustainable Development Goals or Pope Francis's charge on Laudato Si, we're always saying, what are the needs and how do we meet them? One of the questions that I asked, at UD you ask a lot of questions and think about issues. Post-UD was, why in the first time in history are the wealthy healthy and the poor obese? And so there's the larger scale kind of things that you think about as human rights student and someone who's trying to do something in the world. And then there's the piece of cities were designed for the health of industry, not the health of people. So on a more local level, thinking about how do we redesign Dayton for the health of the people. And I think food access, energy access fits in that.
Hi, my name is Kata Lucas, and currently I'm working as an analyst with the NGO working group on women, peace, and security. And I would say a lot of my interests in both feminist research and advocacy have their roots here at UD through the classes I took with Dr. Hudson, and also the classes I took with several other faculty members here. The program really enabled me to find those specific issues that I have a passion for and connection with, and really enabled me and gave me those tools to kind of pursue the career I wanted. After I graduated from UD, I pursued a master's degree at the New School, and I started a fellowship while I was in graduate school with the NGO working group. And that work eventually led me to my current position, in which I do a lot of different kind of analysis for the group that contributes to the organization's advocacy around the UN Security Council. Also, I would say I pursue some of my own research, which Dr. Hudson mentioned briefly. I was in Bosnia for the last 5 months, and it was really here at UD, again, through my classes in the Human Rights Studies program, where I found that specific interest in the Balkans and really kind of set the foundation for pursuing my own research.
And I'm McClain Johnson. As she mentioned, I am an attorney advisor at the National Labor Relations Board, which is the independent federal agency responsible for protecting the rights of workers to join together with or without a union to improve their wages and working conditions. It's not something that I was at UD that I thought I would be going into. I came to UD as a pre-law student intending to major in human rights, so I knew I was going to law school. While I was at UD, I was involved in many organizations that kind of informed what I wanted to do, some environmental focused, all focused on service and community organizing. But one that really kind of helped lead me down this path was through the Center for Social Concern. I was the UD representative for a group called Leaders for Equality and Action in Dayton. And at the time, they were organizing a Get Out the Vote campaign to help overturn Ohio Senate Bill 5, which was a bill passed that restricted public sector collective bargaining rights. And so I got out there and I was door knocking and I was meeting community members, a lot of union leaders, and people teachers, firefighters, who would tell me these stories about the things their unions had done for them, how they felt more protected in the workplace. And it stuck with me, not enough at the time to overcome my desire to do environmental law, but when I got to law school and I was trying to pursue these opportunities to do something in the public interest that would also lead to a career, I received a fellowship, again, back here in Dayton, working with the IUE-CWA, who then encouraged me to go out and work on immigration issues in the community. I got to meet with Senator Brown's office, talking about how we would integrate immigrants into the community through jobs and through anything else they could do to help support these communities and make Welcome Dayton a reality. We also did work with tax incentive financing and all across the spectrum while focusing on working people's rights. That led me to kind of really just go full steam ahead into labor law as something I wanted to do. It touched on all different aspects of human rights, and I was able to engage in just this interdisciplinary approach in my everyday career. That led me then to, once I graduated law school, I spent a year working at the AFL-CIO in their general counsel office, doing appellate work, supporting working people, and now at my agency, I get to spend every day helping protect and safeguard those rights that are guaranteed by federal statute and hoping to spread the word that they exist because unions need all the support they can get right now.
Great. Thank you so much. It really is, I think, one of the greatest pleasures for university faculty, and my colleagues in the audience, I think, would concur to welcome back students and to see all the good work that they're doing and how in this field in particular, in human rights, they're charting a new path, right? Because it's not a degree that automatically lends itself to this is what comes next for you. And so one of the questions I'm asked most frequently is, what can I do with that major in human rights studies? And can I really get a job with that? And my parents are concerned that I won't actually make a living. And these are all really good questions. They're fair, they're important. And I think as we sit here today, I can sort of show you proof of concept that these things are possible. I'm not saying that it's easy, and I think they're gonna say the same for these young professionals, or even that they have it all figured out quite yet. But I'm sure that they can share some of that with you. So one of the things I had asked them to reflect upon is, as they think about themselves in the process of charting a career and a path in the field of human rights or human rights advocacy, what strategies have worked for you and in terms of this journey? What strategies have worked? What's been the most challenging pieces as you navigate this terrain?
I guess I will start. For me, my career is at the beginning, very beginning of its tenure. So for me, this question is definitely, for me, reflected in my graduate school studies. At Fletcher, my concentrations were human security, human rights, and conflict resolution. And I took those classes in addition to other ones. And having that lens that we learned here and bringing that toolkit and that way of thought into those classes, and then classes on counterterrorism and terrorism, national security decision-making, civil wars. Human rights is at the center of all of that, and thinking through topics that may not originally at the surface you think is human rights issues, but way deep down there are human rights issues, whether it be with terrorism and everything, that you can use those lenses that we learn here at UD and grow upon that to solve issues that may be security issues, immigration issues, the whole gambit, food security. And I think definitely looking at human rights beyond just kind of that initial small scope that you think it is. And for students kind of looking forward, human rights is everywhere, and having that lens in your pocket can be, I think, indisputable.
I'd agree with that. In terms of applying that lens in different scopes, I think that started here at UD for me. Whether that was as a Dayton civic scholar looking at local issues in terms of what is happening in terms of development here, access to basic needs, what areas are being revitalized, and what does that mean for other communities, to, in Dr. Talbot's class, going to my first lobby day at the Capitol and practicing those skills, being able to put those in my toolkit, to working in the Center for International Programs and being exposed to different cultures and building empathy for what does it mean to welcome people into our community, and what is our sphere of influence, right? Of course, it's important to chip away at larger scale policy changes, but what we do have control and influence over is how we show up in our neighborhoods, how we show up in our communities, and so being able to apply that human rights lens to our work. So really the strategies started here at UD. I don't think I was aware of them, aware that that's what I was doing at the time. But those strategies then, and those experiences really, when I started my program my master's program in social work, I realized what a large scope social work really entails. So it's applying that human rights and anti-oppressive lens to work, whether you're doing it in a clinical setting, whether you're doing it in a direct service practicing setting, community organizing, or macro level policy change, anti-discrimination, respecting the dignity and human dignity of individuals is really the foundation and core of social work. So.
We're jumping around, so I was like, okay, I'll throw us off the line. I think for me, my strategy has been just saying yes to anything I'm remotely interested in. I pursued the human rights major because it sounded really interesting to me. I received the mailers when I was still in high school, and I was like, that sounds like a good time. If I want to go to law school, this is a degree I'm interested in, and it's going to be 4 years where I can just explore this subject. And I got here, and I was like, I'm going to focus on homelessness and food security. And I was like, wait, actually, water law and water rights, I love that. Oh, labor rights are something I'm interested in, stopping human trafficking. And I got to get involved in all of these, which meant I met so many community leaders and fascinating people who told me their stories and were so willing to help me along the way. I mean, looking out, I see so many people who I've met through so many different organizations or in classes, and it's exciting to kind of share that passion with them. As I worked with them, I had no problem reaching out because we had this shared passion for human rights. So if I ever needed a reference, I had no problem going and saying, we talked about this. Would you mind writing a reference for this? To which the reply was, of course I would. Have you also considered applying for this? So it was incredible just the amount of support you get when you reach out and are involved with people. There were some times I was definitely overcommitted, and so make sure you're balancing that. But if there's an opportunity and you're sort of interested, say yes and just see where it leads.
So I think I'm on a path. I've created a path, so to speak, for what do you do with human rights in the world. I think part of the strategy I learned, as a human rights student from the Marinus here at UD, from my experience at Center for Social Concern, was it's important to be an active, intentional listener. You hear community around UD so much, but I think one of the gifts the Marinus really bring there is if you're really intentionally listening, whether it's a gunshot, domestic abuse, vacant land, that drug dealing's happening, whatever it is, therefore, what can you do? And I think the importance I experienced at UD and post is you need a community, you need intentional relationships at the workplace or out to be able to say yes and to not get too burnt out. I mean, I got burnt out at UD, I think, when I was trying to start a nonprofit while taking all these classes. I learned the hard way in that. So saying no sometimes means saying yes to something. And I think I've honed in a little more focus, food security, energy access. I'm passionate about everything, but once you create that path, then you're starting to say, how do I raise a family and still do all this? And that's what I'm struggling with now. I have 2 kids under 2 years old, and you start wondering, shouldn't I be getting a living just wage, which I'm advocating for others. But I definitely think the strategy piece and path piece was strong for me at UD. And it's a labor of love, so you see the needs and you try to make an impact.
I would say that I've tried to create a path. I don't know how well it's going all the time. I think it's a little bit windy, but generally I would say the specific interests that I developed here at UD and the passion specifically related to issues of peace and conflict and feminist theories of international relations, that has really been my guiding light, I would say, and that foundation really started here at UD. And so I think that I've made the majority of my career decisions since graduating based on my passion for those interests. So I would say I'm a little bit of the opposite in the sense of I don't tend to say yes to everything. Instead, I've been very particular about the kind of, whether it's a job or a school or a fellowship that I would take on. But I guess something that I did find out kind of through the course of everything I did end up taking a job a few years back that I kind of thought, oh, I'm not going to specifically use that human rights lens that I had acquired here. But even in the course of doing that job, I worked as a policy analyst in local government for a few years. I thought, I'm going to take this job. It's a time where I can develop my skill set, so then later on I can take that skill set and I can use it to work on the issues that I care most deeply about. And while that's true, and that was a likely stepping stone in the process of working this job I didn't necessarily really want to have at the time, I found myself using my human rights degree every day, whether it was assisting a policymaker on writing a resolution on paid maternity leave, on Indigenous people's rights, on disabilities rights and access to public transportation. All these issues that obviously I had exposure to in some capacity or another in the program. I found myself using that lens really frequently in a job that I guess I didn't think on the surface I was going to be doing that. So I would say it's not. It's often it's not a linear path in the human rights career, but for me, it's been very issue-driven. But then in the course of that, I found that I've also had experiences and exposure to a variety of issues in which I'm using my degree in my everyday life. So.
I think another thing to just add, I think we're all trying to use our knowledge and education with human rights and do something about it. It's interesting to me, human rights pops up even when I'm not trying to focus on it sometimes. Just a quick example of that, it's like I've been getting jobs the last 6 years where I can get benefits and a living wage so I can do my labor of love, and negotiating part-time so I can stay committed to what I'm passionate about. But then even there, if there's some issues in the environment or the workplace or people's wages, and I'm hearing all this, then it's just natural for me to say, why don't we organize and meet with the director or whoever and talk about this, and so it's hard to not make it a part of your life, whether it's at the workplace or generally other things you're doing in your family life or otherwise.
All right. So I would like to hear a little bit more about how you overcome the challenges of doing human rights work on a daily basis. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, some of us, in terms of preventing burnout. And some of you have more experience with that, I think, than others at this point in your young careers. But I think this is an important piece for individuals who are considering careers in this area. So, challenges, how you overcome them, preventing burnout, that sort of thing.
I think the legal profession lends itself really well to a concrete example of a challenge. You lose a case. You lose it at the Supreme Court. You lose it at appellate court. It is a terrible sinking feeling. Within the labor community, there's such an echo chamber that sometimes you can get caught up in this feeling that the world is ending. There will be no unions tomorrow. Everything is terrible. Workers just have to deal with the fact that they are now slaves. That is somehow what it can feel like. And then you have one person in that group who stops and says, hold on, we can use this. I think one example would be there was recently a Supreme Court case that restricted the abilities for unions to collect fair share fees. That was Janus at the Supreme Court. And unions took a minute and said, this is going to be hard on us. We now are representing people who aren't paying. But you know what? This means we have every incentive to go out there and talk to these people and say, why don't you want to pay? What do you think we can do better that would want you to come back into our family, come back and join us, and come join with your fellow workers? And so I think when you have someone else around you who's working on the same thing, who's passionate the same way, that's your support group. And so for me, it's been staying very connected to other labor attorneys, connected to other attorneys who work in human rights and in public interest more generally. I also, the labor and employment person in the room, I will only work an 8-hour day. I know my rights. I am not entitled to overtime, so I work 8-hour days. I go home and I do not check my email. I'm just very clear about that. My boss knows that. Everyone in my office tends to do the same thing. That is what we are paid for. We do not have any provision in our contract that provides for overtime, so we all do the same thing. If they want us there, they can pay us more. So that is a very practical know your rights.
I would say two big points are, and it's kind of piggybacking off of what you said, finding support, but also in addition to that, finding a mentor or mentors that they don't necessarily have to be engaged in exactly the same kind of work, but people that you can turn to in both the personal and professional capacity to just guide you through those challenges. I would also say, for me, probably the most rewarding part is when I've been actually in the field conducting interviews for my own research, but I also found that is the most overwhelming experience that I've had, especially when I've gone into an interview, and in the course of an interview, there's very personal, traumatic information that's shared with me. How am I supposed to respond to that? How do I choose to respond to that? And then it's always been after that kind of interview that I find myself reflecting back and thinking about, does my research really matter? How is it actually going to impact that one person's life in particular? And a lot of deep questions about kind of what am I doing and is it really important? And so I think it's extremely important to be both self-reflective throughout your journey, but also have a strong support network and definitely mentors you can turn to that not only reaffirm or just agree with what you're doing, but help guide you on that path and help you reflect on, okay, here's what I believe to be my primary goals, and here's why I think it's important, and how do I get from point A to point B. And I think that's really important to keep in mind during the entirety of your career.
I think for me, one general piece of advice and what's helped for me is just burnout in general is being able, to say no to some things, and that's okay. And also, if you need to take an evening to kind of reset and just watch your favorite TV show, your favorite movie, or go have your nails done, or go to a movie with a friend, have dinner, that it's okay to do that, is because it'll keep you going in the long run, and that maybe you won't check your email that night or whatnot, and you have to say no to some work function or school function just to kind of keep you going, keep you sane. It's okay to say no and give time for yourself. The self-care is important as well.
I would echo some of these similar thoughts. I think for me, I work directly with families surviving poverty, so exposure to vicarious trauma can easily lead to burnout in the field. And for me, it's kind of a parallel process of I found an organization that works directly with families and is also advocating for change. And that change happens interpersonally, it happens in the organization, and then it's also happening on the wider local, state, and federal level. And so that helps fuel and keep me going, because I can use those stories to then motivate the policy change, right, and the change at the different levels. And it also helps keep me motivated in my work with families, because I know that I'm not alone doing the work. So sometimes when I'm sitting across from a family and hearing what they're experiencing and feeling like, there's no clear path out of poverty for them, or, path to housing, or whatever it may be, the challenges that they're facing, I know that I'm part of a wider coalition and group of people and organizations who are fighting for affordable housing or changes to the system that we're operating in. So that parallel process, being able to be connected to both, has been really important to me. And if you're working somewhere where that might not be an option, I think the importance of affinity groups or wider coalitions, whether it's personally or professionally, is also really important. Find your people, call them in, call others in, and use that as a support group, and also to take action and act on things and advocate for change. So that's also been a really helpful strategy in trying to prevent burnout. And then kind of lastly, for me, it's been staying connected to the spark. So right now I'm doing anti-poverty work, but it was really, refugees, that was the spark that led to kind of my passion. And so I volunteer with a youth refugee group in Colorado, and that's been really great because it's related to my work and my passion, but it's also something that I'm committing myself to, and working with youth can be really great because their perspective will give you a lot of hope for the future and make you feel like things are going to be okay. We're going to be in good hands coming forward. So,
kind of agree with everyone up here that mentorship is so important, whether it's emotional, spiritual, professional. Seek individual mentors, and also have support groups, not just in the workplace, but without. What keeps me kind of going is when you work with a group with a common mission or values, the hope of knowing when a small group of citizens get together, put their minds, resources together, you can really make a difference. And I guess that's what really keeps me hopeful. But yeah, definitely mentorship, support groups. Can't say enough how important that is to sustain yourself. And then back to the saying no means yes. Hopefully you do that too, to have some hobbies, have some time to spend with family. I see what I do as I've been told avocation, A and then vocation. It's kind of what supports your vocation, my vocation being marriage and family life. So sometimes I wonder, which one's my vocation, family life and marriage, or my passion for social justice and human rights? And anyways, that's something you're always going to have to struggle with, but the importance of having the mentors, groups, and saying no to things is important.
Well, and to kind of echo what you were saying about volunteering as a big thing, I mean, as you can kind of tell based on the different descriptions of our jobs, some of us work very intimately with people who have experienced traumatic things and work with clients and have that really personal connection. I do not in my day job. I work very much on a policy level. And so for me, sometimes dealing with the frustration that comes with there's a policy coming down that I have to work on that I disagree with, the solution for that is I go and I volunteer with clients. I go and I see someone who I can make a difference in their life face to face, and it reminds me, this is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm doing the work I'm doing to help these people. And so just kind of changing what I'm doing, going back to the spark, going back to the impetus that gives me a little bit of that fire and keeps me going long enough to say, I will fight the next day, I'll fight the next battle, I will just keep going.
So excellent words of wisdom from wisdom beyond your years, for sure. Thank you. So I have another question, and then I'm going to turn it over to you all to ask questions as broad or as specific to our panelists here. So all you students out there who are in my office asking me, should I go to grad school? How'd you pick that? What about the Peace Corps? What's it like to work for government? Now's your chance. So I'll be turning to you momentarily, so get ready. But one more thing I'd asked you to reflect a little bit on. I'd like to know what you've learned about human rights or advocacy since you graduated, or even something that you maybe wish you knew then that you definitely know now. So I'll just open it up.
So for me, one of the biggest things that I have learned and what has seems to stand out the most is the importance of identity and how that shows up. So that's something that I think on a more surface level I thought about and considered here at UD, but it wasn't really until I dove into my graduate studies that I started thinking about my different identities, what privilege comes with some of those, how some of my marginalized identities show up, and how that affects the work that I do, and how I show up professionally and personally, and trying to be more intentional about being aware of that and how that creates how that shows up both in relationships, how that shows up in institutions, how that shows up on so many different levels. And so that's something that I have learned a lot and spent a lot of time considering, whether that was in my graduate school program, definitely in the Peace Corps. That was a lot of very hard and interesting lessons learned about personal and cultural identities, and then that absolutely shows up in something that I try to be really conscious of in the field of social work.
I would agree about the comments about identity and reflecting on our multiple identities, particularly those that come with privilege. I definitely wish it was something I would have been more reflective about in the beginning, especially when I first started to conduct some of my own research. Now I explicitly or intentionally am always reflecting on that, especially working on very sensitive topics. I often get the question, when I've been in Bosnia, I do research on conflict-related sexual violence, and often the question of people I'm interviewing is just kind of, why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why do you care? And just kind of crafting even that statement to share with them, and recognizing and reflecting on it myself, that it is a privilege that I'm actually able to come here and do this research, and that I was able to find topics that I'm interested in, but at the same time, I'm studying people's lives and their experiences, and really reflecting on that, and knowing that whatever research I produce or whatever conversation I have, like these are real people's lives, and that I need to be constantly intentional and just reflect on that piece. I would also say another thing I wish I would have maybe been more reflective about in the beginning is also the importance of building relationships, whether that's in terms of conducting research or working on policy, working in the policy-related field, just not relationships for my own personal gain, but relationships and really, I guess it's hard to describe, but reflecting on that and always being intentional about, no matter who I meet, listening and thinking critically about what they've shared with me, and not just talking at people, but really trying to learn from every person that I interact with.
I think kind of with interacting with other people, that we're so lucky here to have classmates and faculty in a university that is very passionate about human rights and goes very deep and very broad about human rights all over the world. When I went to grad school, you had your niche people that were interested in human rights, interested in security, interested in sustainability. And I think one thing was great learning here and being able to share it with other people is we can talk about the same subject and bring in different lenses for that same issue. I have friends who are interested in traditional security issues, and they think of it one way, and I would bring something in and like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. And I think what the students that UD brings out is we're able to go into the workforce and be that different voice in the room, bring that human rights lens into the room that without the training that we get here and elsewhere is that voice may not be there. So I think learning how important human rights is here in every single facet, and then be able to translate that and expand that to our friends, our colleagues, and other classmates beyond UD, I think is important.
To build on that just a little, the hands-on experiential learning you get as a student of UD, specifically with human rights, is so important. So when you do go in the world and try to figure out how to make a difference, you have some concrete experience of, here are real issues, and here's how I experience we can do something as a collective. One thing I've personally done, it's been helpful, and there's pros and cons to it. I've rooted myself in a neighborhood and community that I'm trying to make a positive difference in. And sometimes you wonder, like, oh, do I need to get away from this more? You know, you're living and working in the same place, and whether it's Africa or Dayton or wherever, I think there's an importance to that and a value to that, the kind of social capital and trust you attain with these relationships as you talk to people and listen to them. Sometimes that can take 5-10 years to build. Anyways.
The one thing I wish I had known before I graduated was that human rights opportunities don't always say human rights, or human rights issues are not so clearly labeled. It's amazing the number of opportunities I hear people working, doing or working in, and I'm like, oh, I had never considered that. That it had not been on my radar. Or I'll hear about fellowships, today I was talking with the business school, and we were talking about how corporations are going to have to move in the way where they're thinking about how their actions affect human rights. And I've seen that. Corporate social responsibility codes are things that are happening, and major corporations are having to hire human rights advisors and ethics officials. These are not career options I ever considered. When I was here, and maybe it was just my own personal narrow mindset because I knew I was going to law school, I was like, oh, well, you can, work at Amnesty International, right? That's what you can do. There are so many other things you can do locally, internationally. I wish I had realized earlier that human rights, like you said earlier, is really in everything once you start looking. When I start talking about an issue, I kind of always go back to, what are the basic needs being met? Is there access to food, education, healthcare? Are those needs met? Okay, then can we promote, further rights? And I just see how it's all connected, even when I'm talking about something that seems so disjointed from or disconnected from what I would traditionally call human rights. It's all there, and you just need to find a way to apply human rights to whatever it is.
Thank you. Okay, we will now take questions from the audience. Just be sure you stand up, or you can help me with the mic. Awesome. And tell us who you are, and we'll go from there. We can take a couple questions, and then we'll open it up.
Hi, my name is Chuck Watts. I'm president of the Empathy Surplus Project and a participant of the UN Global Compact, and UD is a part of that Global Compact. Our organization is NGO local, part of that, and UD is academic, and there are several other categories. My question to this panel, and maybe to Human Rights Center too, is how could your university leverage you out in the field to recruit participants in the Global Compact? And do you know about the Global Compact? So how would that happen? Are there, when I think about my experience in my own town of Wilmington, you talk to a business owner or a municipality. There are only a couple of municipalities that are part of the Global Compact in the United States about joining the Global Compact, and they look at you like you have three heads. How would that leverage, what do you think that leverage would look like as UD graduates this legion of human rights advocates?
Hi, thank you all for sharing. I was wondering if those of you, my name is Ellie Rizzo. I'm a senior here studying international studies and with a minor in anthropology. And I was wondering how you guys made the decision right after graduation to either go Peace Corps or grad school or law school, like what went into that decision specifically, vocationally, personally, all those different things that you might be able to speak to. Thank you.
One more question.
Hi, my name is Chloe Massicostales. I am a fourth year here with a major in human rights and sociology, minor anthropology. I was wondering if going from, in either undergrad and then to grad school and sort of like looking at human rights from a more academic standpoint, and looking at the policies from a more academic standpoint versus in the more practical, like either helping directly with clients or directly with individuals, if there was a jump for that or a leap, or like how do you transition from talking about things from like a theoretical standpoint of these are the policies, these are the rights, versus how do you apply that in a much more complicated and constantly moving situation?
Thank you. Okay, so I will turn it to you. They're very different questions. So perhaps we'll start with the first question. It actually kind of relates to Chloe's question in a lot of ways, right? Because whether or not you're familiar with the Global Compact, I think the essence of your question in some ways is to say, all right, we've got these global norms, right, like the Global Compact, we've got the UDHR, but when you're working in Denver on anti-poverty, right, or you're in Dayton and you're in these spaces where those are not terms or agreements or norms that people are aware of, or do they have time to really care about, right? How do you take those global norms, those that you're so ingrained with, right? At least I hope so. And translate that, interpret that in a way at the local level. So we start there, and then we'll turn to the more practical. They're all practical. We'll turn back. Go ahead.
So I think knowing your audience and who you're talking to is important, right? So how do I talk to my grandfather from rural Ohio about refugees is a little bit different than how I talk to one of my colleagues, right? And so finding the common ground and what language is going to speak to them, right? So to my grandfather, talking about taking care of your neighbor, talking about taking care of your community is a good start and a good lead-in to, rather than getting into human rights and declarations, right, and covenant on refugees, right? That's not a conversation that's going to call my grandpa in. So finding ways and knowing the audience and being able to be strategic and how do we talk about these issues, and how do we make it relatable to that individual in a way that's going to be meaningful to them, I think is a start.
Yeah, that could be a whole class. But I think one thing I've learned, just take the environment, for example, meeting people where they are in their value system, their belief system. And I think everyone cares about the environment, for example, but not everyone's going to want to hear about global warming or climate change. In fact, at least most people in the city of Dayton just living in these neighborhoods, low income, that's going to turn them off. But meeting them where they are, so they want to save money on utilities. And if that means solar and energy efficiency, great. They like food. If there's a way they can plant tomatoes in their backyard and they're helping the environment, great. So yeah, it's definitely the language you use is important in really knowing your audience or the relationships you're building and how to connect with them. So I'm always constantly thinking the global kind of level, but I've learned more oftentimes than not, at least with the people I interact with, you really just got to figure out how to find the way they would talk about it. And hopefully they may not ever have the goal of making a global international impact, but if you can get them committed to the environment somehow just because it saves them money, great. That's something.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely has a lot to do with how you communicate with various individuals and the language you use. For me personally, whenever I've met with different interviewees or with different organizations, I'm not talking in human rights-y language or using technical terms. Instead of talking about rights, I'm often asking in my interviews, like, tell me about your experience, tell me about what you need, tell me about your concerns, and even avoiding topics of primary sensitivity for those I'm interviewing with, such as labeling something like as a war, as such and such. I often just ask, tell me about your experience in the last 5 years and how it could be better, to kind of just almost make the conversation a little bit more informal, more personal, because most people that at least I've interviewed, they don't really care if I do feminist research or not. That doesn't really mean anything to them. In some ways that would be a negative, that would bring a negative connotation with it. But once I'm able to talk and engage in a conversation with someone, and they can understand that I am interested in just listening to them and hearing about their experience, I think that's the most important piece for me. So.
I feel really privileged because I get to kind of work on the other end of this. I get to work on moving human rights language into standard political discourse. When I'm talking about labor rights, I think it comes to a shock to possibly even some of the people at my agency. I'm like, that is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The ability to organize, join together with your coworkers, that is in there. And so by bringing these in and invoking these international norms and showing they can coexist with our society, it helps normalize some of this language so that when you are talking to your grandfather, it doesn't seem crazy to invoke this international standard. I hope to move that discussion forward and tie it all together so that people can see how connected it is. And it's really a privilege that I'm able to work from that level to try to kind of hopefully get that language to permeate and bring human rights, the human rights language into modern US political discourse. I'm working on it.
I can't follow any of that. That was great. So I agree with everything that they've said.
Why don't you start us on the question of why did you choose to go straight to grad school? How did you make that choice? How do you feel about that? I know you're only a few months out of graduation, so we need you to reflect on it.
So for me, I will be honest, I did not have much of a choice going straight from undergraduate to graduate school. Due to my fellowship program, I was contractually obligated. So that decision was already made for me. For me, my decision was what I was going to concentrate on, what school I was going to go to. And I think a lot of that is also figuring out what you do want to focus on in graduate school, whether it be a Master's of Arts, an MPP, an MPA, the whole gambit, or if you want to focus on business and human rights, and trying to figure out what school was the best fit, including what connections did I want to make. Part of the reason I chose why I went to Fletcher was because my supervisors that I've had that I look up to and everything were Fletcher graduates. So seeing whose footsteps did I want to follow through is led to kind of my decision with Fletcher. Having gone through school about 20 years straight, from like 3 years old to 23 years old, I do recommend taking at least 1 year off, at least from my experience. I personally had a little bit of burnout. That first semester was rough. UD is rigorous in its writing and its reading, but in my experience, graduate school is a whole nother level. So having at least a year, and also to kind of breathe again, and then also being able to figure out what you do want to concentrate on, because my master's was in an interdisciplinary program. I took classes from human security, terrorism, decision making, civil war, kind of the whole gambit, sustainability. So I kind of did in graduate school what I did here, a little bit of everything, but programs are different, and being able to find what you want to focus on is also helpful too.
So I think I did things a little bit backwards. My family was convinced I just didn't want to earn a salary but I went to graduate school right after undergrad, and that really came from my enthusiasm and excitement and passion around kind of my last 2 years here at Dayton, and really feeling like, okay, went through the first few years, and I was like, I'm interested in all these different aspects of human rights and international studies and political science, and I've been exposed to all of these really great experiences, and now I know what I want to do. I want to be a social worker, and I want to work with refugees and immigrants, and so that led me to jump right into grad school. And then while I was in grad school, I took some international development and community organizing experiences, and Peace Corps had been, something that I had thought about all throughout my time in undergrad, and had been something, even in high school that I was interested. So I got to the point where I felt that with my graduate school studies that I could really take and put into practice, and that would help kind of continue to build skills and also give me a wide exposure to the social work field. I too would, if I could do things differently, probably would have taken a little bit of time off before starting grad school. For me, it was the classes would have been a little bit more impactful if I would have had some of that professional experience first. So a lot of my classes, even the practical classes, had to be still based in kind of theory because I didn't have the personal and practical experience before starting grad school. And so now as I supervise MSW interns at my organization, I get so excited when we're talking about different theories and talking about applying those to our work. And I just wish, personally, when I was going through my educational experience, that I would have had more experience going in.
I kind of feel the opposite. I'm very happy I went straight through. That might stem from the fact that I knew before coming to undergrad that I wanted to go to law school. I knew starting in high school that I wanted to do something in human rights or public interest, and that I felt at that time that if I wanted to do something and kind of climb the ladder in those and get to a position of power within an organization like that, I would likely need some continued education. And at the time, I was undecided between an MPA and a JD. I went to Indiana thinking I would do a dual degree, decided against that. And from there, it all made sense. I was very excited to get to the point where I could be bringing cases, be acting on behalf of clients, interpreting laws that we try to make. For some reason, we try to make them as inaccessible to people as possible, which doesn't make sense to me. So I was ready to get out there and start working on that as fast as I could, which meant go through it. I did an accelerated start in law school so that I could take more classes. Yes. And I don't regret it, but it's also something I had thought about. I think there were people there who were interested in public interest, but kind of went to law school thinking, you could do something with this. I wouldn't recommend that path. But if you know that it's something you want to do and you've thought about it, you've talked with people. I talked to Dr. Hudson about law school a lot. I was in her office a lot asking her, is there work I can do so that you'd be able to serve as a reference for me? What schools should I be looking at? It was a very informed conversation. And so I think having those conversations is critical when you're talking about going to grad school because, like I said, there are human rights opportunities that you don't need a grad degree for. Just look for them, talk to people, you will find them. You don't need a JD or an MPA to do human rights work.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I was like you, and I feel very confident in the decision I made to go straight to the grad school. For me also, I felt like in my last couple years here at UD, I had already developed particular research interests and particular research questions that I wanted to explore, and so it just felt like it made sense to me to pursue that right away, and I didn't feel burnt out in terms of going to school. I actually still can't wait to go back to school, so I think that also just says something about my personality, and so I feel confident or still feel confident with that decision. And I also had spent a lot of time prior to applying to graduate schools kind of to brainstorm and look at potential jobs that I was interested in, and most of those did require a master's degree or a law degree. And so it just, because of the combination that I had particular interests already and didn't feel burnt out and was looking ahead to possible future careers, it seemed to make sense. And then in terms of the specific school, I guess, that I chose, is I really liked how interdisciplinary the Human Rights Studies program at UD is, and that's one reason why I chose the new school's International Affairs program. And I would just say that program also had a specific focus and field program to Bosnia, and so because I had already developed that interest, it just made sense for me to kind of go for it.
So I definitely didn't take a conventional route. I was the first to go to college in my family. So my family was always thinking, you're essentially not trying to make a salary. What are you doing with your life? It took about 3-4 years after college, committing to making a difference. They finally saw, oh, our son's happy and he's making a difference. Look at this. So, but my choice was to help start and found a lay Marinist residential community. As a lay Marinist, I knew I needed a community that would help support, challenge, hold me accountable to try to make a difference in this world. So I knew I needed a community around me. It couldn't be, oh, I go to Africa and then I call some people back in Dayton or Chicago every now and then. So that was important to me. Moving forward, though, I realized I've been pushed into leadership roles, not ones I'm seeking. I think Brother Ray Fitz asked, hey, do you want to be executive director? And I said, not really, why me? And eventually I said yes to this. He said, if not you, who? But what I realized is the importance of mentors, but also continuing education. So for me personally, I've looked at the nonprofit leadership management certificate UD offers now. It makes a lot of sense. This is what I'm doing, but it took me 6 years, unfortunately, of learning by doing. We got to fundraise $100,000. How are we going to do this? Well, let's figure it out and do it. We need to hire someone and pay a living wage. We need to meet this need, and it's just been figuring out by doing. So if I could go back, maybe it would have been more strategic and intentional about the mentorship I needed or the education I needed. But with that being said, the importance of hands-on learning by doing is so important to me personally. That's probably how I learned primarily. That's probably why I never thought, oh, I'm going to go to grad school. So I wouldn't necessarily change it, but I would have been more intentional about, okay, is there any certificates or more mentors I could have along the way? Because you can feel like you're in a silo sometimes.
We have time for another question or two from the audience.
My name is Father Ted Cassidy. I'm over in campus ministry, and I guess this is a difficult question, but in your experience, the left and the right political positions, are you finding in your experience, I don't know how to word this, or authenticity from both sides, and what kind of obstacles are there to bringing those together? Like maybe obstacles from top down and pressures and, yeah.
Yes, please.
It's been 70 years. It seems like a battle without end. Have we made progress?
Okay. This is your final exam. All right, so those are big questions, folks. Does anybody want to take a stab at one?
I, as a federal employee, I'm going to say I'm viewpoint neutral here, especially in regards to political questions.
I'm not going to step on that one.
And a reminder that I am expressing my own opinions and I'm not representing the government in any way here. That being said, I think there are some things that left and right can absolutely agree on. I think sometimes we lose that, and we lose the fact that we can agree on so many of these items because we phrase them in ways that have become divisive issues. Instead of saying people people have the right and deserve to live a life where they can provide for themselves and their families, it turns into fight for 15 or, well, businesses need to also have. No, at the end of the day, what we're all saying is I want the right to work one job, support my family, and have time for leisure. And I think most people would agree with that. We come at it in different ways, but if you go back to the UDHR and you kind of point out point by point, that's where you can kind of say, most of these we agree on. There might be some where we disagree on how we're going to get there, but I think the fundamentals are there. And so maybe what the solution is to go back to these documents that historically we've all agreed we should be working on, and that we're going to secure these for people, and figure out, where do we diverge on this? What is the issue, and can we find the compromise? And so I think, to your point, there is a long way to go. But we've also had discussions, and we're seeing work. When I was talking with Kata earlier about some of her work, she mentioned that sometimes it's difficult when you're working with one person and you want to make their life better. But what you're learning is that there are some good things that have happened, and there's progress each step of the way. There's so much more to go, but the incremental steps are just as important, because maybe in the next 70 years we won't have the same conversation about, has anything changed? Maybe the conversation will be, X, Y, and Z have changed, and we have met these goals. What now? That's hopeful, but I think you have to be hopeful in order to both reconcile the differences and move things forward.
I'll add upon that these views are my own. And the first one, as a new federal employee, I will leave far away from me. Regarding progress, I think the biggest thing is that 80, 90 years ago, we haven't had these conversations. We have the United Nations talking about this, the Human Rights Council, we're here talking about this. You have the new generations of people that, who knows what we're gonna face, but also who knows what we're gonna fix, or at least try to make better. I think there has been progress, but I think as we read the news, we do have a long way to go. But I think the important thing is to not stop trying and to keep bringing up new generations of people to look at things a different way, think of new ideas, and continue to fight for everyone.
Every time. I'll just provide a snapshot maybe of how I see some progress, just from my own personal research. So I research conflict-related sexual violence in Bosnia. When the Dayton Peace Accords were signed in the city, there were no women in the room negotiating that peace agreement, and the Constitution that is contained in the annex of that agreement is arguably completely gender blind and not on paper tangibly useful to integrating principles of gender equality and women's rights into transitional justice processes in Bosnia. And the peace building process went on for a long time in such a kind of, I would argue, exclusive and gender-blind way, but in the last few years we've seen at a more formal level various UN actors partnering with various civil society organizations and the government to actually work on these issues that have been largely stigmatized and marginalized. And so in very tangible ways, now we're seeing progress like on the ground in Bosnia for both women and men survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. It's too late and it's not enough, but we're actually seeing tangible changes in the sense that some women and now men are able to better access their rights in a way that arguably would have never been thought was possible before. So that's my perspective on change, I guess.
So for me, there's a lot of noise in the world, and I'll just use the example of City of Dayton. You know, there's a PBS documentary kind of highlighting the opioid epidemic, and, you know, there's good to that, raising awareness of what's actually going on the streets, but on the flip side, where's the positive? You know, we do hear more of the negative, and someone who's more intimately involved, you know, on the streets of Xenia Avenue that has, you know, drug deal and prostitution, it's like, yeah, there's some real issues. We got to do something, but at the end of the day, people want to do something about them. But we do need to celebrate and highlight some more of the positives, and sometimes you don't hear that on the national level or when things get very political. But my experience of whether you're talking about food, water, energy, just basic human rights, food, shelter, clothes, you know, people do want to improve those for their lives, just to make a living wage, to be able to raise a family. And so I don't know. I personally, sometimes I do try to cut out the noise and stay focused. That can almost detract me, getting too weighed down. But I also see pendulum swings in leadership. I mean, for me personally, right now, the U.S. government, there's a pendulum swing, and I'm sometimes like, wow. But then you have Pope Francis in the Catholic Church, like, whoa. I mean, for me, it's like, Laudato, like, wow. As a UD student, where was Pope Francis? I don't know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think when we think about the past 70 years, I think it's really easy with, you know, the challenges, especially recently, to get caught up in the things that, the fights that we still have to fight. But I think it is really important to remind ourselves of the wins that have happened, how far we have come along, and then continuing to think about what are, again, our spheres of influence. So to slowly chip away at those larger goals as an international society and as a national society, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, to continue to chip away at those, and remember that we have control about how we show up, right? And that's something that, you know, recognizing the basic dignity and respect of another human being, and making sure that we're approaching our work through a lens that is anti-oppressive and not only recognizes but really celebrates the rights of the person who's sitting across from us or who's sitting in the room with us is really important, and hopefully through that work of relationship building that we can build authentic relationships and have authentic conversations and find common ground to continue to work to hopefully recognize all of the rights that human beings have to the fullest level.
One recent story I just want to share. Mayor and his family got together, and there was an outside speaker, Maha Selassie, very involved in the Gem City Co-op market. But he presented the red line maps of the U.S. from the 1930s and showing how intentional investments were made in cities. Dayton, obviously, Oakwood got a lot of investment because there's white people that live there and they're wealthy. And it's clear why the West Side hasn't got investment. And that's still an issue. It wasn't just a Dayton thing, it was a national thing. And so we looked at the 2015 maps, and fortunately, not much has changed. I mean, things have changed, but the hope I have is, I don't know, looking back to 1930 to today, I feel like when I speak to some of the older generations, whether it's grandparents and then the young professionals I kind of know today, I see a lot of fire and passion to change that, and the language they're using. So my hope, and my minimal experiences, I think human rights, the language, and what it's about is really taking hold of, you know, younger generation now. Not that it's not there in the older, but it's had time to be digested, be talked about. So I do have hope.
I do too. Okay, I have one final question for our panel, and we are running short on time. But before we do that, I just want to take 1 minute to recognize the Human Rights Studies alum who are in our audience, because there is a handful of you out there who could also be sitting up here. So you know who you are. Please stand up. Katie, Katie, Maggie, Susan, stand. Yeah, I know, but you still are. Stand up. And we had Carly Hall, who was here as well. So Katie Brossart, Maggie Schaller, and Susan Weaver, all part of the human rights family here at UD. So thank you very much. All right, so in closing, what piece of advice can you give our students as they navigate human rights work, these networks? In other words, if there was a human rights toolkit, what would be in that? So we'll just start at the end and work our way down. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
I think for me, and I think for everyone, to me personally, the most important thing has been writing skills. UD definitely presses that. The rigors of writing at UD is very strong, and I think for human rights, and regardless of what career you are going into, having good writing skills is, you will be praised by whoever you're going to be employed by, whether it be writing long reports or just writing quick memos. Being able to write well, I think, is like currency in this business, in any career. So to me, especially, yeah, with anything, I think writing well, writing succinctly is the most important thing in any toolkit that you can have.
I would say networking and building relationships. So again, trying new experiences, putting yourself out there, even if you think you might not want to ever be a lobbyist or experience what it's like at the state capitol. Go to a lobby day, try that out, network, ask people for their business cards, and start building those relationships, because you might be surprised at what you actually enjoy or what that might spark and fuel, and you may meet someone who later down the road could have a career opportunity for you or connect you to someone, a friend, or someone else in their professional network. And so just the importance of building those relationships.
Yeah, well, a toolkit, definitely. When I was here, I graduated in 2007, there wasn't a human rights center. There wasn't nonprofit leadership management certificate. So seeking out very much hands-on experiential learning is important, but also once you're thinking of all the issues in the world and what's going to be fulfilling and passionate for you to try to make a difference, giving yourself experiences to learn that in the classroom and out, like, just simple things like resources are needed once you know the needs. Funding. So to learn, how do you find funds? How do you fundraise? If you're going to start an NGO or a nonprofit, how do you do that sustainably? I don't know. So I think if I could go back having more experience at UD to do that and not have to, it wouldn't be as clunky for me now. But that's what I would put in a toolkit.
I would say, echoing all those other comments, especially the importance of building relationships and maintaining relationships with not only professors, but other mentors in your life that can really help you navigate this path, which is just not linear in any way. And I also think it's important to keep in mind that in human rights work, I think the career path is full of surprises, and I think that's a good thing, but to always hold on to, as you mentioned earlier, that spark that initially got you involved in this field, and to also know that spark and those interests and that passion will grow and evolve, but to always kind of keep that original motivation close, because I think in this work, it's the personal and the professional they're so intertwined, and I think that's what makes it exciting and great, and it's always, I think, important to keep that in mind, and no matter where it takes you.
My advice would be open, authentic, and inquisitive. Those were the three words that I thought really best described the way you should go out into the world after your first year. Be open about who you are and your experiences, your degree, the things that you've done, the things that you don't know. Be authentic, because if you're interested in this, you have some sort of interest. You have something that's driving you, and that's a good story that people want to hear. And be inquisitive, because people involved in this, we all have stories, and we're all so excited to share them. And that makes for a really easy conversation. And when you start having those conversations, you start developing this network of people who now you've shared your passion, and so they want to help you pursue it. Especially your first year out, people love just kind of passing things along, or, oh, I'll pass your name along. And it might seem like it takes a few steps to get to someone who's actually in a position to hire or pass along a resume to someone in a field you're interested in, but it works. And so if you just stick to those 3 points, you'll have great conversations, you'll meet incredible people, and you might end up, doing exactly what you want or doing something you never imagined but that you love. So, good advice.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Before we thank our panelists, I want to invite all of you to our reception that is following this immediately, just down the hall here. We've got a lot of food and drink, and we also have 2 displays that will be going at the reception. One that will be showcasing the work in progress of our Moral Courage project. So the students and faculty that spent 2 weeks in El Paso in May will be showcasing some of the work that they have been doing. And we also have our Human Rights Studies seniors through their capstone project. They did work on human rights issues here in Dayton, and they will be showcasing some of that work. So please join us at the reception, grab food, get drink, and seek out not only our fantastic alum, but those students in those spaces as well. Following the reception at 6:30 will be our marquee panel featuring our very own Shelley Inglis, Bert Lockwood from University of Cincinnati Law and longtime editor of Human Rights Quarterly, and Juan Mendez, a recipient of the Romero Award many years ago, almost 20, and among other things, former special rapporteur of on torture. And so please stick around and help us celebrate into the evening. And thank you so much for your insights, your time, your passion, and for being here today. Thank you.